And this thing in the White House today was so clearly orchestrated to just embarrass Zelensky in Ukraine. Like very, very, very orchestrated, very, very, let's say media savvy by the Trump administration. I think it'll blow back in their faces big time. Ukraine was invaded by Russia, but the president is taking the opposite side, and his whole administration is taking the opposite side, right? And American people aren't dumb. They see that and they wonder, why would he do something like that? And now to come in to ask this guy to fly across the world, which is very hard for, it's hard to get out of Ukraine. It's hard to fly to the White House. And then to do that and embarrass him, it's just it's disgusting. Genuinely, I think that he thinks he's friends with Putin and he admires Putin and he thinks that what Putin has done in Russia, I think he thinks it's like cool that that this man controls the whole country. Yeah, I'm blown away by what we just saw. It's like totally blown away.
Christian Borys is the founder of Saint Javelin, a Toronto-based company that makes various clothing and swag to fundraise for charities that support Ukraine. He has years of experience working as a journalist, and Saint Javelin social media is a trusted information source on breaking news from Ukraine.
Hey, here we are talking Ukrainian English with Christian Borys, the founder of Saint Javelin. Christian and I crossed paths back in 2015 when we were both working for Hromadske International in Kyiv, Ukraine. And it's been pretty amazing seeing how his career has developed and the twists and turns. And we're going to get into that today. So, Christian, great to see you again. It's been a while. Um,
Yeah, thanks for having me, man.
yeah, I mean, you have a great story, and I really want to get into like how you got St. Javelin where it is today and all that. But let's talk a little about current events first, because I think there's just so much going on related to Ukraine and the new American administration. I mean, how have things looked from your perspective, sort of the last couple of weeks, and then leading up to we're recording this on this day where Zelensky met Trump. Um,
Yeah,
and that didn't go over too well. We just watched that interaction.
I would say s- the best word is either sad or embarrassing or pathetic. I think it's um like what you just saw in the Oval Office is probably the most disrespectful thing that I've ever seen any American president for sure, but any foreign leader do to another foreign leader live in front of cameras ever. Like, obviously people have disagreements behind closed doors, right? But they basically ambushed him, and it was obviously it was by design, right? They asked him to come sign this vague agreement, and just before we started talking, I think Trump just CNN, Caitlin Collins, she just tweeted that Trump basically said, "Oh well, after all this, it looks like Zelensky's not ready for peace." So basically, it seems like it was all designed to bring him in, make him seem like an idiot or whatever, ambush him for their audience, and then kick him out and like leave him high and dry. I'm in shock. I've ne I don't think any of us have ever seen anything like that before. I think it's disgusting. But I mean, it's the pattern that's been developing for the last few weeks, right? It's him going after Canada. That was unprecedented, right? It's it, it- it's it's unbelievable how Canadians have turned has sentiment has turned against America since Trump's been elected and since he began with this 51st state rhetoric and all of that stuff. And then it just seems like he's going after every one of America's allies and just destroying these relationships one by one and parading these leaders in, airing his whatever grievances, misconceptions about how America is being treated. And and it's like a media circus, right? It's I don't know if any work is being done there. I think it's just like parading these people in front and bringing the cameras in, making sure you get some clips. So from Ukraine's perspective, uh, it's sad, man. I know Ukraine certainly wants American help. Um, I think that by all accounts, the biggest problem that Ukraine has right now is literally manpower because they've so many men have either been killed or wounded or they've served their time and they can't go back to war. They don't want to go back to war. And now Ukraine's literally running out of men. And for them to do that to the guy who's been leading them, it's just disgusting. So America, I mean Ukraine, Ukraine certainly would love American support, but I wonder if this really changes, if that meeting really changes the calculus for European leaders, and if we just see like a whole new world order start to take shape here. Because after seeing that, I can't imagine how any European leader would uh would ever trust this administration. As much as, you want to maintain alliances with America, this kind of just shows you that like this administration is to totally different, right?
Yeah, I
And
mean,
yeah, who knows what happens in 4 years? But I'm in shock as we record this. Like, I can't believe it. Yeah,
yeah, I mean, we literally this happened. We haven't even had time to process it. It literally happened 5 minutes before we came on. But going back even before today, yeah, his coming after Canada is really sort of out of the blue, unprecedented, and hard to comprehend. He's always had this affinity for Putin, sort of always giving him the benefit of the doubt and never using any harsh words for him. I mean, but even like now that he's president, he's in power, this embrace of Putin in Russia, I mean, it's shocking and it's
yeah.
um even though you sort of expected it to some degree, I think the level and the way he's doing it, it's very unnerving and it's hard to comprehend. And I don't know. I'm trying to like, do you have any ideas like what his motivations might be for behaving this way? Like, you've seen a lot of things about like, oh, he's a Russian asset or he was groomed and like why is he so submissive to Putin and no one else?
I mean, obviously there's these theories about Krasnov, and I mean, like honestly, it. I'm very much not a conspiracy theorist, but I think that when you see an American president come in and fucking turn the country upside down and throw away centuries of, I mean, decades, centuries, whatever, of alliances, of relationships with allies in favor of basically conceding completely to Putin and to Russia in exchange for nothing in return. Like America has all the leverage, right? Um, it's 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 way past shocking. And this thing in the White House today was so clearly orchestrated to to just embarrass Zelensky in Ukraine. Like very, very, very orchestrated, very, very, say media savvy by the Trump administration. I think it'll blow back in their faces big time, honestly, because I think that Ukraine has been one thing that I've actually seen conservatives turning against Trump about, because he's so overtly pro-Russian when everybody with any sort of, room temperature IQ and above understands that Ukraine was invaded by Russia. But the president is taking the opposite side, and his whole administration is taking the opposite side, right? And American people aren't dumb. They see that and they wonder, why would he do something like that? And now to come in to ask this guy to fly across the world, which is very hard for, it's hard to get out of Ukraine. It's hard to fly to the White House. And then to do that and embarrass him, it's just it's disgusting. Why do it? I don't know if he thinks it's going to appeal to his base. I genuinely I think that he thinks he's friends with Putin and he admires Putin and he thinks that what Putin has done in Russia is, some sort of like I think he thinks it's like cool that that this man controls the whole country. Like maybe he's that egotistical, but all the things that have been happening in America, like putting in loyalists, basically unqualified loyalists to like run the FBI, the CIA, Department of National Intelligence, all these things are pretty much the same things that Putin would do. So it's almost like he took a blueprint for how to become a dictator. And yeah, I'm blown away by what we just saw. It's like totally blown away.
Yeah, I mean, I guess he likes this mafia type structure, and that's what Putin
Yeah,
has, the way he runs Russia, and that's the way Trump
yeah,
is trying to run, probably has run his organizations, and that's how he's trying to run his administration and the country. And so he respects the other mafia boss, but you know, he doesn't respect the European democratic European leaders because he just perceives them as weak or naive or whatever it is. They're not up on the same level as him and Putin and other strong men, quote unquote. Um, but we can speculate about that. What does Russia have something on them or don't they? But we're not going to know. Um,
I can't imagine. I can't like I can't even imagine what it could be at this point. I honestly I feel like he wouldn't even care if they had something on him because
right.
he's
Yeah.
already been, he's already like a convicted criminal, like all these things, like the pictures with Epstein, Elon's pictures with Epstein, all these things, like what could they have on him that would be shocking? I think it genuinely just comes down to he thinks like he sympathizes, like he thinks he's friends with him. He views the world in the same way that he does, right? I really think that's what it comes down to, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah. And a total detachment, I think, from the reality that Ukrainians have been facing in this war and like the suffering and all the
Yeah.
devastation and the inhumane behavior that Russians have had towards civilians and soldiers in Ukraine. Like totally detached from the reality that's going on and like what they're enduring. I mean that's what it seems like to me that he's just totally disconnected and ha I guess just doesn't give a shit. He just doesn't care. It's just not interesting for him. I don't know. It's yeah, it's disturbing. It's very disturbing.
Yeah. It's really disturbing is a good way to put it because it's like what the fuck does this mean going forward, right?
Where are the Republicans? Where's like the rest of the Republicans who,
Yeah.
have been lifelong Ukraine supporters who voted for Ukraine aid? I mean,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
that's
And I know it's one thing to not want to supply weapons and stuff like that, but it's a very other thing to pass the UN resolution, to to symbolically also turn your back on Ukraine. That's a real, I mean, the weapons are a real thing, but the symbolic, the messaging, all this media circus, it's really it's how else do you take it but to say that it's completely pro-Russian sentiment from the presidential administration, right? It's unbelievable. Like it's really unbelievable.
yeah. My hope, like looking at the glass half full, was that if they sign this minerals deal, then Trump feels he has some vested interest in what's happening in Ukraine because he made a deal and he has some, then he's got some investment. He wants a return on his investment. So he has to protect that investment. So then he cares more about what happens in Ukraine in this war and making sure that he gets his return on investment, like so I was trying to look at it like that, like those minerals or whatever. From what I understand, they're not so easy to get anyway, so they'd have to probably send in American personnel to be on the ground or whatever. And some of those minerals are in occupied territories. So like somehow by his transactional nature, that this would like create a transactional attachment to Ukraine. That was sort of like what I thought would be positive out of this minerals deal.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. That minerals deal is also its own like there's it's I don't think it's even a theory, but there's a columnist from Bloomberg who is a um not rare earths, but is a commodities expert. He writes their columns on commodities, and he basically said Ukraine doesn't have any of those. It's all just like a it's all just a circus. Again, this whole deal, the whole idea that this could actually be some sort of like repayment plan. It's not feasible, right? So to me the question is like, yeah, what's it all for? Like, why are you shaming? I guess they're trying to get their followers to just also turn against Ukraine, but so many of their followers have turned against Ukraine. I actually think that it's having the opposite effect somewhat, and now they're so obviously lying that I genuinely think a lot of older conservatives like Reagan conservatives, they just look at this and they're like, what the fuck are you doing, right? Like this is a an ally we've supported and you're now siding with our traditional enemy. But the scary part I would say is like, what does this mean for Ukraine, obviously, but also for America's allies, like to be willing to throw an ally under the bus like this. It's yeah, I don't know. It's unbelievable.
Yeah,
Unbelievable.
I wonder for how many of the MAGA followers it's a breaking point. I'm sure for some it is, but there's also a significant percentage of them that Trump can do no wrong, and
Yeah,
mental
100%.
they'll do
100%.
mental
Yeah.
gymnastics to blame everyone but him for
Yeah.
anything that happens. This cult of personality that he has. So it'll be interesting to see like this is the closest like sort of like breaking point, like the most effective potential breaking point for the like people who voted for him maybe.
Yeah. That seems like a very, very poignant moment in history.
Yeah, well, my hope is that Europe will sort of unite with after the new German elections and act fast as opposed to following
They
America's.
have, yeah, I mean that they have to, right? They have to because the opposite scenario is Ukraine falls into tens of millions of refugees. And then what do you do? Because that cost is going to be much larger, and you can't, you can't stop that, right? These people aren't going to, when you read the stories of what happens to people in the occupied territories, the territories occupied by Russia already, people aren't going to stay in Ukraine. They're going to leave as soon as they can, right? If you think about the worst case scenario, Russia keeps making gains and America completely abandons Ukraine and Europe also doesn't step up. It just results in a serious situation where you have so many millions of refugees, right?
Yeah,
And it's the costs of that societal costs. It's enormous, not just financial costs, but like so. Hopefully, Europe European leaders actually maybe watching this moment right now spurs them into action. Like maybe Macron takes charge, maybe the new guy that was just elected in Germany. Um, I don't know anything about German politics, but I read that they are quite pro-Ukrainian. So at least Ukraine has that, right?
yeah. I mean, we can't predict what's going to happen, but St. Javelin's been on the scene for since the war started. So let's jump back a little bit and how you got there. I mean,
Yeah.
I knew you as a journalist. in 2015. You were working for Vice. Like, when did you start getting into journalism? How did you end up going to Ukraine for the first time? Let's start there.
Y- Yeah, I so my trajectory is like it's everything that I did prior to St. Javelin is basically kind of led up to me being in a position to start St. Javelin. And I only realized that well into St. Javelin. So basically, I had worked at Shopify, which is a big e-commerce company. Basically, it lets you set up a website easily. So I was there in the early days of Shopify. I left Shopify because as I was working at Shopify, I was already writing for Vice. Um, and I decided that I didn't really love working at a tech company. I wanted to go out and do exciting stuff, and I wanted to be a journalist. So I left. Eventually, I ended up in Ukraine. One of the first things I did in Ukraine was about drones. So I did a story for Motherboard. They were so interested in it, they asked me to do it as a video piece, which kind of at that point, Vice was like the cool new media. And that helped me get some decent attention because I did a story about how Ukrainian volunteers were beginning to test bombs on drones. And this was 2015. Now, fast forward, this is like a technology that's everywhere, right? I remember when the full-scale invasion started, those guys that I had interviewed, 10 years ago now, they were instrumental in preventing Russian convoys from reaching Kiev. So it was incredible to see these people that I'd met 10 years ago and what they were like, how the technology had progressed, and now how it's crazy how far it's come since then. Um, but I started to do some good work in Ukraine. I did frontline work, and me and you worked together. I did some like covered politics and stuff like that in Europe, like more broadly. And I just tried to do good work, and I was able to also start working with BBC, Washington Post. I got to go to Venezuela. I started traveling more outside of Ukraine, but Ukraine was still like my core for journalism. And then unfortunately, I saw that a lot of the people that I looked up to, mentors in journalism and just older people who'd been doing it for a long time, who were with, these big media companies. I saw them getting laid off. And when I saw that, it really made me think about where I was in my journalism career, and was I willing to, uh, you know, take the risk of being just like not really making it, because there's so few jobs left in journalism now. It's really been like democratized in a way, right? Where everybody has their own opinion on online now. But that means that like these proper media publications, they were in a state where there just weren't that many jobs. So I decided to go back to Toronto and open a marketing company. And
Like,
basically, yeah,
what
yeah.
what year was that?
2018.
2018.
2018 is when yeah. Late 2018 is when I left Ukraine. Um,
Let, let,
and
let me just
yeah,
interject before you go on. Just some listeners may not know. I mean, you gravitated to Ukraine because your background is you have a
yeah,
Ukrainian father and a Polish mother, correct? So you grew up
yes,
in this split
yeah,
Polish Ukrainian household. Is that
yeah. So both of my parents are born in Poland. My father is Ukrainian. My father's family, his father and mother came from the southeast of Ukraine, like Przemyśl area, Podemyśl. Um,
yeah, that's where my grandfather
and
was from.
Yeah, so my father actually moved back there. My father lived in Canada. He immigrated here when he was like 19 or 20. He lived here for 20 years, and then he ended up moving back. So he lives in Podemish. Um, but my mom is 100% Polish. Her family was thoroughbred Polish. It was weird. It was a weird experience growing up because there was so much friction between Poles and Ukrainians. That's all I ever knew growing up, right? But for me, I just felt like I was both. Um, but it was always kind of like in the community and whatever, you always kind of it felt
You
like
got
there
to
was
pick a
pressure to
tribe.
like
You got to pick a tribe, right?
pick a side, which I don't know. I just never did, so I just kind of like floated. Um, but I the one thing I remember when the full scale invasion started was how emotional it was to see all these Polish people taking in all of these Ukrainian refugees and like welcoming them with open arms. You know, saw kids like coming across the border, women crossing the border, and they were all given homes. And like I was helping my dad find places to stay for lots of people in the very early days. And to me, it was like finally you people realize that you're very much the same. Like there's no reason to have these historical, I mean, yes, there's reason to have historical grievances, but like move past it and try to like share a future together. And since then, unfortunately, it's been like a roller coaster between Poland and Ukraine. Um, I hope that there's more understanding between the two sides or the two nations. But yeah, it was always just like a childhood filled with friction. My dad wanted me to be, super Ukrainian. My mom honestly didn't care really. Like she didn't care if I was Ukrainian or Polish or whatever. She never pressed that stuff on me. But yeah, that was the experience. And then and then when I came back to Toronto, I that was 2018. Cannabis had just been legalized in Canada, and I had set up a marketing company, basically doing the skills that I had from journalism. So shooting films, writing, stuff like that, applied it to, the corporate world. Cannabis was the biggest thing in the country at that time, so started working with a bunch of cannabis companies, a bunch of different industries, but things went well pretty quickly. And I did that. And I was doing that until basically January 2022, which is when um I saw in December 2021 is when I started to read the articles about what was happening. Russians are massing troops along the border. And it started to take me back into the work that I did in Ukraine. And I started to see more activity in these group chats that I've just been in for a really, really long time. And people were starting to talk about the potential of Russia invading in a different way than we ever had, because there had always been these rumors and like concepts of here's what they would do if they did invade full scale. When are they going to invade Mariupol? Since 2015, since I was there, the whole time I was there, it was every few months you would hear these like you'd see graphics on TV or like some article would come in or be posted about when is Russia going to invade full scale, to the point where nobody took it seriously anymore because you would just hear this all the time. But January 2022 comes around, and then Biden starts talking about it officially as the president of the United States, saying, yes, the Russians are massing troops along the border. President Putin, like, we see what you're doing, starts calling him out publicly, right? And and then I started posting about it from my personal account. And I started basically just saying, like, here's what I'm seeing from my perspective as somebody who lived in Ukraine, who worked in Ukraine. I'm no longer supposed to be this neutral journalist. So here's my perspective from my own brain. And I I didn't try to fact check the Russians. I just made fun of what I was seeing them put out, when they were saying that the Ukrainians are Nazis and all this kind of stuff. I would just make fun of them because they have all these elements of Nazism in their country, and they're like, it's a fascist country and all these kinds of things. And and people started following what I was putting out, whether they liked the information or they liked the humor or whatever. It just started like building up a little bit, and then one day I decided that I was going to take this Saint Javelin symbol. which is basically a symbol of the Virgin Mary holding a javelin. And it's not meant to be like disrespectful of religion or anything like that. It was made by an American artist named Chris Shaw. So I didn't even design it. I just basically stole the picture, made it into a sticker. And I said, hey, I'm going in anticipation of what I see coming, the full scale invasion. I'm thinking about these people. And I was thinking about soldiers and their children and their wives and the effects that it has on them when those soldiers die. Because I'd met a lot of women and kids who had lost their fathers since 2014. And I just thought, like if this happens, the long-term effects on this country are going to be so horrific, right? And and I set up a fundraiser with that sticker. I had 100 stickers. Set up a simple web page on Shopify, and I posted on Instagram, and I said, "I have 100 stickers, $10 each. All the money's going to go to Help Us Help, which is a charity that works with Ukrainian orphans." Um, and and the first day there was two stickers that sold, and then the next day it was $1,000 in sales, and I was like blown. I was totally blown away. And then it was like $5,000 in sales, and I was just, you know, I started to understand that this was something special. And then on February that I started it February 16th, and on February 24th, when the Russians invaded, it just took on a life of its own. The follower counts just went through the roof. People were looking for all sorts of information, looking for ways to support Ukraine, do whatever they could, and we were there. Whereas a lot of other organizations simply didn't take the threat seriously. They thought that the Americans were fear mongering, and I never took it as fear mongering. I took it as like, the Americans are telling you exactly what the Russians are doing, right? And I was also paying attention to a lot of like open source intelligence guys who were literally looking at satellites and saying Russians have, 1,000 tanks on the border. They've never done this before. They have like mobile crematoriums. They have like blood blood bank vehicles, stuff like that, things that you would only use if you're about to go to war. So these were people identified these things, and when I saw that, I believed that the Russians were going to war. So I just felt like I wanted to do something to help. I never expected it to grow into this big thing that it has become, but yeah, that's basically the origin story, and now we just passed 3 years of St. Javelin, and it's it grew into this big organization. At our biggest point, we had like almost 20 people on staff, um, and now we only have 5 or 6, I believe. But we've turned it into a brand. So basically, like this sweater, for example. This is one of our St. Javelin fleece sweaters. We're just making clothes in Ukraine, like really good quality, kind of like Patagonia level, Patagonia North Face, that kind of thing. Some of the what we make, we donate to soldiers. So most of it we just sell online, and then we're able to donate portions of what we sell. And like we just donated 5 grand on February 24th, and yeah, like
You insist
fundraise.
you insist on having this stuff produced in Ukraine, pretty much.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
That seems to be like one of your sort of missions
yeah.
as you've evolved the company, is that you want to put Ukrainians to work to produce, right? Is that a
It,
philosophy
it,
that's part of like your where you're
yeah, 100%. I think it's like from my perspective, when this thing started to become something, I felt like I had seen so many nonprofits and charities struggle to raise funds and stuff like that. And I felt like if we could build St. Javelin into its own like its own engine, like let's make things that people actually want from us. and sell it to them, and we can recycle the profits and actually support Ukraine long term. Like that was the thesis, and actually that's what we've been able to produce now. Um, the goal, the it was, in the early days, I was able to write like crazy checks, like $500,000 to some of these organizations,
Yeah.
and that's an incredible it's an incredible feeling to be able to do that. But it's also like that era has passed. We don't make those kinds of sales where we're able to do that. But what we can do is, instead of buying, or instead of like buying or producing things in China, where say we spent like $100,000 on product development, production, sewing, whatever it might be, instead of spending that money in China, we spend it in Ukraine. So we have like this network of Ukrainian manufacturers who they're grateful for the the work that we're able to provide them, right? Because Ukrainian economy's been just hit so hard by this war. So it's a nice feeling to be able to actually take that money that otherwise would just be spent in whatever. Usually China makes everything, and we're actually able to make it in Ukraine, and it's, super, super good level, like very high level quality. And the people that we work with, they're excited to work with us because they see what we're doing, and they want to be, they want to be part of it. So it's turned into something that I hope can be sustainable long term, and I hope that we're able to help people, you know, unfortunately, like the effects of this war, they're going to last for generations. So, as long as we can keep this thing going, I want to just keep it alive, basically.
Well, I think it's pretty amazing, just like, I mean, we overlapped in the documentary film journalism world, and when you're working in that sphere, I mean, you're putting out stuff to try to inform people, perhaps influence the way they process certain events, and it's sort of like a very subjective thing. And here you've had a very tangible physical impact. I would think that there must be some like satisfaction in having done that and be able to like look at these statistics and see the growth and and see the numbers, for lack of a better word, and just be like, wow, like this is, I can look at this and be like, you should be proud, like satisfied, and like, I mean, it's pretty awesome, it's pretty amazing, Christian, like what you did, like using the skills that you had throughout those years, and that people trusted you to sort of like to give you money and believe that, it's going to go where it needs to go also. There's a lot that you accomplished that, I hope you've taken stock and like where you come, and
Mm,
you feel like satisfied, because it's a very like tangible thing. I mean, I know you've had even some high level meetings in Ukraine and things like that.
yeah, I mean, like, no, that part of it was always kind of absurd to me. Like I was on a panel for NATO giving my perspective on disinformation and just the experience of St. Javelin and what we did. But I honestly don't think I'll really understand or like really take stock of it until I'm older. And maybe I can like look back and think like, oh, I actually did something that was meaningful. I understand, like I do understand that it's meaningful, obviously, right? But like I've always just been so go, go, go. And I have a 2-year old, and my mom is very sick. Like, just juggling all these things, it's impossible to just sit back and be like, oh wow, look at the contribution that we made. I never really think of it like that. I just think of it like, how do we how do we keep this going? Like, how do we do more? That's always the goal. But I'm sure when I'm older, I'll yeah, sit down and think about like the impact that we made, and like, hopefully what we saw today will just be some sort of stain in history and not like a hugely consequential moment. But I yeah, I have faith that like this country will exist and these people will persist. It's just I was messaging a soldier on February 24th just to see how he's doing, and he basically told me like, we've been through worse. Whatever they're gonna throw at us, like if they cut us off or whatever, like we've been through worse. So the resilience of these people is unbelievable. It's phenomenal. It's just it's impossible to understand what they've been through and like what they've endured and what they're willing to endure, right? So I feel like the least we can do is to try to fucking sell some clothes for them.
Well, I
Yeah.
think that you've also used your, journalistic skills uh, within St. Javelin. I mean, St. Javelin as a social media is sort of a go-to for information. Also, like you have a lot of the cutting edge, sort of breaking news information. You presented with this sort of like tongue-in-cheek humor, also, which I think is part of your personality, and it works. I mean, like you have a beat on what's going on and you're presenting it in a way that's has some added value, for lack of a better word. So like I think that that's pretty vital also, in
Yeah,
distance with
I think
what St. Javelin is doing,
it's funny because the media like the media side of it, our social media, um, I didn't realize that we literally have hired people who did not know that St. Javelin makes anything. They just thought we were like a meme account, right? So we've so much focused on the information and like that side of it. Uh, and I get so caught up in that because that's really my passion much more than like making clothes, right? It's this information and understanding what's going on and telling those stories. I love that side of it. And sometimes I just forget about the whole other side of it. But like that side of it, the clothes and whatever allows us to do the information side of it, right? Like we don't take grants and any and like we were never supported by USAID or aid, whatever. Um, thankfully. But we never went that route. It was always just like let's build some sustainable engine for ourselves that we can keep this alive. But yeah, I honestly like we reach tens of millions of people with those with through the social media each month. So it is I know it is for a lot of people their source on the news in Ukraine. So it's a big responsibility.
and even bigger now, given what's going on in the current administration and the Russian disinformation and how effective it's been. I mean, I mentioned this with Maxim. There's always like in the mainstream media, like, well, Russia says this, but Russia says that, and they're sort of like giving equal value to what Russia says, even though it's not true, but it's the official
Yeah.
Russian statement, and people, I don't know, put some value into it because it's like the official Russian statement, and the journalists don't necessarily, they put sort of equal weight to it, and
Yeah.
yeah.
Which is crazy. It's crazy to me because that's like the antithesis of neutrality because you're basically you know it's a lie, but you're reprinting it just because it's the official lie, right? Which means that you're basically lying to your audience. That part was always insane to me that the headline should say Russia lies about whatever. It shouldn't say Russia says, right? It's like that would actually be objective, like neutral journalism.
And they have to
But
do that with
yeah,
Trump now. They have to do that with Trump now because now he's
yeah,
doing the same thing. He-
yeah, yeah. I know. It's the speed at which everything is happening that I think catches everyone off guard. And it's almost like every day there is a story that would be like a once a year. It used to be like a once a year type scandal, and now it's like every day, right? So this meeting, for example, that just happened, like that would be in a normal timeline, like that would be the worst thing to happen during one administration, probably, right? And now you'll probably forget about it tomorrow because some other crazy shit will happen tomorrow. So yeah.
Well, what's what's in store for you going forward? I mean, you've got the family thing in Toronto, so you're probably going to be based there. But given the current, the year ahead, if like Ukraine is sort of on it or without American support, the way it's been, I mean, do you see St. Javelin taking on any different roles or just doing more of what I don't know, like what looking into the future a little bit, like what do you see yourself doing?
Um, I I mean, we have we have plans for St. Javelin. Like 2 years ago, we released a book, or I guess it was last year, I think. There's things that that I would like to do media wise with St. Javelin, but for the time being, the biggest thing this year is to build the foundation for the business of St. Javelin. Make sure that it's like stable, that it can continue. There's a lot of things that have to happen behind the scenes that are really hard to do, like setting up uh just simple things like fulfillment. When somebody places an order and that order comes from Ukraine, we work with Nova Poshta to send that order, but basically we were the first company to do it, so there's just been a lot of a big steep learning curve for both sides, and a lot of, the customer service types of issues that you have to handle, people getting shipments late, people having to pay duties on shipments, stuff like that. The things that if you're shipping from America, they're easy to do. They're easy to handle. You don't deal with that stuff. But for us, there's just so many little granular things that we're working on all the time to fix. So this thing takes up so much of my time. And it's the thing that I want to see work long term. So this is the big one. We'll try to just keep making a higher quality product all the time, and the media side will always just continue. It's actually, for the first time, it started growing for the first time in probably a year, I guess, because of the added the added I don't even know
Drama.
what the word is, but like attention drama, yeah, caused by Trump. But yeah, people are interested, and like it's our responsibility to try to explain what's happening from the perspective of like a civilian, right? Sometimes it's emotional, but I think that like we speak to people in a way that, it's not dry, right? It's like it hits people in a different way. So it's yeah, that's the plan basically.
Well, it's going to be an interesting year for sure. But I mean, you and I both know from our interactions and experiences with Ukrainians that they're stubborn and they're resilient and they're resourceful and
Yeah,
they really have no choice but to resist, the
yeah.
Russian invasion and occupation.
Yeah, there's literally no choice. I mean, the Trump and Vance make it seem like there's a choice. There's no choice, right? It's what do you give up your home? Like, why don't they give up their homes, right? See how you like that. It's not a choice. It's they have to do it. Um, and it sucks because nobody wanted to ever be in that position. And I feel it's really hard to watch all these people that you've known just struggle through all this shit, right? So whatever we can do to try to help them out. Like some journalists reached out today, their funding got cut off. So I'm gonna see if we can help them figure something out. Because Ukrainian journalists, they're not like flush with cash, like from the beginning, right? Most of these media organizations in Ukraine, they're basically just getting by the skin of their teeth. So, but they're the ones that have been telling the stories. for a long time. They always work as like producers for the foreign correspondents, the ones who write in English. So whatever we can do, like we'll try to keep it going.
Maybe just to end on this note, for people who I don't know if these type of people, listen to this podcast necessarily, but for people who are like, well, Trump wants to stop the war. He's gonna make a ceasefire with Putin. That's gonna be good. People are gonna stop dying. I mean, and they're portraying like, oh, Zelensky doesn't want to stop the war. Like because Zelensky doesn't want it to continue after Trump leaves office, for instance, right? Like what from your interactions, what is a proper ceasefire look and why is the Trump ceasefire insufficient for Ukrainians?
Like all of the evidence shows that the Russians don't keep their promises, right? Everybody who understands this war, who has watched it for a long time, understands that the Russians basically will just use this time to rearm, conscript more men, and attack again. Um, if they were serious about peace, they've had a very, very, very long time to withdraw their troops, but they Putin sees it as it's not about territory. It's about like Ukraine is ours and we will take it and we will control it. And that's it, right? So that's their goal. And they just keep on working towards that goal every day. It doesn't matter how many men they lose. They don't care about their guys. They don't care about the equipment. They try to inch every day towards that goal. And I think that they see Trump now as an opportunity to reset American relations. Their economy's in bad shape. So if they can reset American relations, get sanctions removed, all these kinds of things, they can get their economy started again. They can get more money towards going towards that goal. Obviously, they'll just manipulate Trump and lie to him and whatever, and then fuck him over at the end. But they invaded Crimea, they invaded Donbass. There were so many ceasefires in Donbass, the Minsk agreements. They broke every ceasefire. They've done it before in Chechnya and in Georgia. In Syria. This is what they do, right? If there is a ceasefire, which isn't a true ceasefire on good terms for Ukraine. It's just with a security guarantee, it's just going to punt the ball down the line in a worse way, right? I know the Ukrainians are basically saying right now the war is actually at a stalemate because the Ukrainians have ramped up their FPV production so far, but they are literally lacking human beings to like sit in trenches and fight the war. Um, and obviously, like they don't want to lose any more people, right? The Ukrainians would, I'm sure Zelensky would have loved to stop the war yesterday. They just want the Russians to leave. That's all the Russians have to do, right? That's all this comes down to. Just leave. It's not your country. Just leave. But they won't. They feel that that country is theirs, and they want it. And I feel like the only way you can stop it is by beating them out of the country or signing an agreement that actually has a true security guarantee. Like you took the nukes away, and and Ukraine has no they don't have that protection anymore. So now it's a different ballgame for them, and they just have to fight with whatever they have. And if America strips everything out, it's just bad. But hopefully what we saw today is just a media circus, and the reality behind the scenes is going to be better. But sad day, just sad day.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, I know you got to go, and I can keep talking about this.
Yeah.
I don't even know. I don't even know how to describe like what we saw today. Um, but yeah, everyone does what we're gonna do, and we're gonna keep doing it. To support Ukraine. That's how it's gonna be, and Ukrainians are gonna do it with Europeans, hopefully, or they'll have to do it on their own. Do the best with the tools that you have. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's It's definitely not a good turn of events. But I like to think that there's a reaction when things go bad, that there's like a reaction, a response to that. So maybe that'll be Europe, maybe that'll be people in the US, maybe Canada will step up, you know.
I never thought that at the beginning of the full-scale invasion that they would, but they did. So I hope that that happens again. I mean, it can, right? It's just it takes a lot of political will.
Yeah, I just want to say, there's part of me that's sort of glad that he's standing up to Trump. I mean, I don't know what the repercussions are going to be, but everyone is so like bowing down and kissing the ring, and he's not. And I don't know. Some people will say he's not being diplomatic, and maybe he should, but on a gut level, I sort of like that he's not. Like just
Yeah,
yeah,
I mean, it'd be very hard to be after everything that you as the leader of the country that's been invaded, everything that you're seeing. I can't imagine how hard it is to just go there and talk to these guys who have nothing on the line, right?
yeah.
And the money that they're talking about is like a fraction of the budget on a yearly basis. It's just sad. It's just sad. It's like the only way to describe it. It's just fucking sad.
Yeah, well, I know you got to go, and
Thanks a lot, man. It's good to talk to you. Good to see
yeah,
you again.
Доки всі сплять, доки сонце іще не зійшло, гине вогонь, догоряє остання лампада, де той літак, що світанком візьме на крило і понесе, там, де небо, тепло і зорепад, доки всі сплять, доки тиша скрипить за вікном, холод весни заповзає в кімнату над ранням, де той вокзал, що покличе сигнальним гудком і проведе між одвічними вперше й востаннє, доки всі сплять, доки сон обіймає рідню в світлі вогню, ти ледь чутно виходиш з кімнати, сонце встає, йде назустріч наступному дню, а літаки паротяги чекають команди рушати.